Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Happy Hour Live webcast from WhiskyCast.com. I'm Mark Gillespie. I will not say back and better than ever because the last couple of weeks have been fun trying to recover from COVID, but finally back to the point where I can join you on the live show and glad to be back. It's been an interesting couple of weeks I would not wish on anyone. Love to have your comments on what you're doing and where you're watching from tonight. You can use the comments via the YouTube or Facebook links. If you're watching us on Twitter, we will not be able to see your comments until after the show ends. The same thing with Twitch. Donner Pass Whiskey. Yep, every happy Friday, everyone. Tyrone Cote, hello from a rainy Nova Scotia, where I'm hoping Nate McKinnon and the Avalanche can take home the Stanley Cup tonight. That would be good. It would be interesting to see someone else win the Cup other than Tampa Bay this year. I'd love to see Colorado win the Stanley Cup. BMO, hello. Christopher Malloy, hello. Donner Pass Whiskey. Having my last dram of Bell Blair 02 that has been stashed away in a sample bottle for 5 years. Wish I had another bottle. I envy you there. I remember the 02 vintage, and that was a good one. And Ian Bruce, hello, everyone, from Aberdeenshire, Scotland. Let's bring in our guest right now, David DeFazio, our pal from Wyoming Whiskey, one of the co-founders out in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. David, how are you tonight?
I'm great, Mark. How are you?
Very good. Let's talk about batch number 100, a milestone. When are you actually putting this into bottle?
It's in the bottle now. It was bottled this past week, and it's going to be shipping out here shortly.
So it took just under 10 years to do 100 batches.
Who would have thought, right? I mean, you've been with us from the beginning, and it's not that I thought we would fail, but you don't really think that far ahead, and to be passing the 100 batch milestone is pretty remarkable.
What makes this batch unique?
To be honest with you, not much. One thing is that because of supply chain issues, we haven't been able to use our custom bottle with all of our products. So we've been using a standard bottle on our small batch for a while. We're bottling batch 100 in our custom bottle, which is what everybody's used to. So that sets it apart from recent batches that we've put out. But as you know, the goal with our small batch is consistency. And each and every one of these batches is, hopefully the same as the last, if not damn close. And so it's more of a milestone moment for us than it is the presentation of something unique.
And you're getting ready to celebrate the 10th anniversary of batch 1 this December. What are you planning in Jackson and Kirby?
A lot of fun. It's time to celebrate. And what we'll be doing is on December 1st, we are going to rent out the Cowboy Bar here in Jackson. It's a Thursday night, and we're going to invite a bunch of folks in, including yourself, to come and celebrate what we've accomplished, and we're going to invite all of our past employees and everybody who's had a hand in helping us get where we're at. And like I said, just have a ton of fun that night. And then probably that weekend, we will be celebrating over in Kirby and trying to tighten the loop down a little bit and just have that be more of the core, folks involved in the company today. So it's something we're very much looking forward to.
So it's not going to be like the 4,000 people that showed up on December 1st, 10 years ago.
No, I don't think we could recreate that magic. As you remember, we invited about 1,200 people, and we figured 800 would show up. The next thing you know, we're looking at 4,000. And luckily, the weather cooperated, because December 1st in the middle of Wyoming could go any way. And who would have thought it would have been 60 degrees and sunny? So
and the food held out, too.
Yeah, everything was great. That was a magical day. And what we decided was you can't step in the same stream twice. There's no way we would be able to recreate that. So, like I said, Cowboy, and then we're going to do something probably in Thermopolis. And just make it different, not try to recreate.
I want to talk about your newest release that is nationwide, the National Parks Edition #2, that you guys have been raising money for the National Park Foundation. This is especially timely with what's happening up to the north of you in Yellowstone, right?
Very much so. We made a decision, to donate money to Yellowstone Forever quite some time ago. And, all of these things have to be, in process a year in advance almost. So we've been working on it for a while. And coincidentally, I was up in Mammoth for the Yellowstone Forever board meeting on Thursday and Friday before the events, before the disaster really, and everything was totally fine. And to see what happened 48 hours later was remarkable, absolutely devastating. So we made our commitment. We're donating $150,000 to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Yellowstone. And as a result of what's happening up there, we've been able to get our partner Edrington has stepped up and has donated $25,000 to help Yellowstone Forever's resiliency fund, which is a fund that they had opened up during COVID to help with employees and basically discretionary needs as they came up. They had closed the fund and is now reopened because of what's happened up there. And we're getting a lot of our partners, the Four Seasons here in Jackson, individuals and whatnot, are donating a bunch of money to it. And I'm very thankful for that.
And the need is there because a lot of the folks that work up there are seasonal workers and living in temporary housing that was pretty well wiped out by the flooding, right?
Yeah, and permanent housing. I don't know how many videos you've seen of the devastation, but there was one employee housing unit a large housing unit that literally washed away. And having visited with Cam Shawley, the superintendent up there, that's one of their top priorities is to expand their housing for their employees. And here we see a house flowing away in the river. It was tragic. It's just unbelievable how bad they got hit, both in Mammoth, Gardner area, Cook City, Red Lodge, Montana was devastated when Rock Creek went over its banks, and even downstream as it's flowing to the east, Billings and whatnot, massive flooding. So it was quite an event.
Give us a sense of what Yellowstone means to the people of Wyoming.
It means a lot. Yellowstone is the reason why people come here in many instances. Obviously, it's not the only national park. We've got Grand Teton National Park here over my shoulder, and Devil's Tower is a national monument. So, there are other draws, but at the end of the day, you're seeing roughly 5 million people come and enter Yellowstone through one of the entrances, and, to take in its beauty and hopefully get a glimpse of a grizzly bear or see their bison and whatnot. And that supports the communities that surrounds the park. But for Yellowstone, these communities would not have much. And so its importance to Wyoming and Montana cannot be overstated.
Let's talk about this National Park Edition number 2 that your colleagues sent me a sample of. This is different from the regular batches of Wyoming whiskey, right?
Yes, and I'll leave it to you to describe the flavor profile. You know me, I'm not one to tell people what they're tasting, but what we started last year was a commitment to our national park system. And we came out with National Parks 1 last year, and that money was donated to the National Park Foundation. This year, again, to Yellowstone Forever. And these barrels are being selected by Nancy Fraley, who unfortunately couldn't make the show tonight, and Derek Spraveri at our distillery. And it's a very unique blend for us. And of course, intended to really present the best side of us so that folks who are lucky enough to get their hands on a bottle will really get something special.
I'm getting a lot of honey and a lot of oak on the nose. Some butterscotch notes. I'm going to be honest, this is my first dram in over 2 weeks. So I'm out of practice a little bit just because of COVID and everything. But
at least you haven't lost your smell and taste.
Yeah, got lucky on that front. Matter of fact, this weekend on WhiskyCast, we're going to have an interview with Dr. Paul Wise, a sensory expert from the Monell Chemical Senses Center in Philadelphia. And one of the people who really can tell what happens in your nose when you nose a glass of whiskey. So that's going to be coming up this weekend. And we were talking about anosmia, that loss of smell that happens with COVID, but it can also be specific anosmia, which can affect individual flavors. For instance, I don't smell sulfur all that well. So when it comes up usually in a Scotch, I don't perceive it as much as other people might, just because I'm not sensitive to that particular aroma. But
Interesting.
the taste on this is nice.
I'd normally join you, but it's a little earlier out here, and I have some things to do this evening. So apologies.
Yes, no worries. I understand completely. It's 5 o'clock here, 3 o'clock out in Wyoming. So taste on this is nice, well balanced. I'll put tasting notes up for it on the website and on the show this weekend as well. But I had a question for you from Chris Ratcliffe. Wants to know what you've learned over those first 100 batches, or the first 10 years, if you want to put it that way. What have you guys learned that you didn't know before?
Everything. I'm an attorney by training, as are my partners. And we got into this because we were very interested in starting something new. It was before there was a craft spirits movement, really. I mean, everything got hatched back in June of 2006. And there were really only a couple of craft distilleries out there at the time, or were coming online at the time. And so there wasn't a playbook or anything. And I've said this 100 times, we've stepped on every rake in the field. We've learned our lesson the hard way, and we've made some, really bad decisions at times, but we also made some good decisions, I think, by luck. And, what have we learned? First thing that popped into my mind when you asked the question was, we were so overly concerned about being a craft distiller and doing everything by hand that we didn't see what the upsides of doing certain things in an automated basis. On our still, for instance, we were always chasing dials, trying to get things perfectly dialed in, and that can be very difficult. But when you automate a continuous still, what you're producing is so much more consistent, and the quality is so much higher. Things like that, that at the end of the day, a consumer, which we thought was going to be really, really interested in knowing that we were chasing those dials every day. And in reality, I think most people really just want to know that, when they taste it, if it's great, it's great. And, how you're making it isn't going to be as important as the finished product. So we've tried to shed some of the concerns that we had in the beginning that turned out not to be very concerning to most folks. That's one of many lessons that we've learned. Distribution. That is the hardest thing in the industry, gaining distribution and getting people's attention. Because, with distributors, if it doesn't go to the bottom line, they're not going to do anything for you. They're not set up to do that. They got 10,000 products, sometimes, and their sales forces can't go out and represent every product equally. So what are they going to do? They're going to represent those that are going to make them the most money. And we were not in a position to achieve that type of attention as a standalone distillery. Here in Wyoming, we kill it. We've got the attention of the folks here, but the moment you cross over into Colorado, with the exception of some folks who've moved down there, it's tough to get the attention of these distributors. So our partnership with Edrington ultimately became one of the best things that could have happened to us because of their leverage, obviously, in the industry and the ability of them to get the attention of these distributors.
That's where I was going next, because when you brought Edrington on board as a strategic partner a few years ago, it's what really catapulted you into a national brand, right?
For sure. We had achieved some minor successes in a few markets, Southern California being one of them, because of a unique distribution system we had there, and a couple others. But at the end of the day, it wasn't going to be sustainable. We needed to either bring in a partner with that type of leverage, or we needed to maybe potentially contract and really focus on our own, a couple of markets only. And Edrington has done a fantastic job of introducing us nationally.
Are you getting any export business at all yet?
No, with one exception. We are in Mexico and a couple of markets down there, and this is by design. We know what we can put online every year, and we don't want to start overextending into foreign countries when we don't necessarily have enough to satisfy the demand here in the United States. There's been some talk about getting it into the UK. As you know, we released a couple of barrels individually overseas. into Taiwan, whatnot. We were in Canada. We are in Canada now in a limited basis, but it's more controlled growth at this point than just doing it because we can. And I would like to rush into that more, because to me, it's just so sexy to think that you'd be able to be, in Germany and walk into a bar and get a shot of Wyoming whiskey. But at the end of the day, Edrington is much better at this than we are or were, and we kind of defer to them on all of that.
Can you see a day at some point where Edrington might take complete control of the company? We've not really had that discussion, and you don't have to get into things you don't want to, but is there a route for Edrington to take over eventually if they wanted to?
Without getting into too much detail, yes. They would not have complete control, but a majority interest, and that's always been by design. So that is on the near horizon. There's a potential of that happening, but if it doesn't happen, that's okay too. I think that our partnership is a good one. I think we agree on most things, and me, I kind of push back on certain things, and I'm the naysayer sometimes, and not very corporate minded, and which I think is a good thing. I think it's good for folks to have the more entrepreneurial input into these corporate structures. And I could go off on that for a while, but I'll end it there.
Ian Bruce says, with the national park modeling and Scotland's connection via John Muir, it would be nice to see a UK release of this one.
We'll take that to heart. And you got to look longer term, obviously, and Edrington looks generationally. Our horizon line in the past has been about 5 years. But I think if we get to a point where we have enough product to be releasing into markets that make sense, like what Mr. Bruce brings up here, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't do that. But we're just not there yet.
And Chris Ratcliffe wants to know, how much has the distillery in Kirby become a tourist attraction, and how hard has it been to handle visitors there while you make whiskey? Kirby's only 92 people, give or take the last census. Not sure whether it grew or got smaller.
Probably it hasn't been explosive growth, I'll tell you that. There's a few of the places there have definitely been improving. And as far as tourism, it is a tourist attraction. We don't do tours to the public right now. We haven't during the entire COVID situation, and that was due to safety concerns. We had some construction going on. We wanted to make sure our staff was protected and not getting sick, because that hit everybody, right? So we haven't been doing tours, but we still run our whiskey shop there. Amanda's doing a fantastic job of managing the tourist demand there. We do tastings. There's a short video that was produced so that people can watch to get an overall high level taste of what's going on, right across the field. And it's definitely become a destination when it comes to special releases. We have an allocation, of course, that we're going to be selling through our whiskey shop, and those sell out very quickly. And people will come to Kirby on the days where they know that these special releases are going to hit, and Amanda sells through the stuff quickly. So for those who know, they're getting their hands on some really great whiskey that you might not be able to find in other places.
And your latest release, the Wyoming only release of Powder River. Tell us about that one.
So we do an annual Wyoming only release. It started back with the Great American Eclipse. The eclipse literally ripped right through the center of the state, came right through Jackson. And to celebrate that, we came up with the Eclipse Edition, which candidly wasn't too vastly different than our regular small batch. Put it in a beautiful canister, and it became a collector's item, so to speak. And as a result of the success of that product, we then moved into Steamboat, which was intended at the time to be a lighter drinking whiskey. Steamboat is the horse that's on the license plates. It's University of Wyoming logo, etc. My goal with that one was to try to capture some of the folks in Wyoming who aren't necessarily bourbon drinkers and are more of a Canadian whiskey drinker. So we went with a lighter flavor profile in hopes of enticing them into the bourbon category. And I think it had limited success, but we abandoned that idea and then moved into a more robust, more complex, deeper flavor profile with Statesman. And to this day, a lot of people approach me and say that that's the best bourbon we've ever put out. So we've tried to continue. We have continued with that same overall flavor profile. Obviously, with Mother Nature doing what she does to barrels, we're never going to be able to do the same batch twice year to year. But the goal is to harvest these barrels from the heart of the warehouse, not take any from the top. So we're trying to keep a lot of the spice out, not taking from the bottom. We really want that rich barrel. And so this year's is a 19 barrel batch selected by Nancy to try to capture that. And it's the highest proof point that we've released. It's 101 proof. Everything has been from 95 to 99 in the past. And here we're at 101. Nancy was pushing me to do a barrel strength on this. And I would normally defer to her 100%. And she knows that. But with this line, that's not what this line of products was intended to be. So I asked, how low can you go, without, quote, ruining it, in your opinion? And 101 was what we landed on.
Nancy really has sort of been the X factor in your consistency over the last 7 or 8 years, right?
Without question. She has added a level of sophistication to all of our back end, barrel selection protocols, batching protocols, and even a little bit on the front end with our distillate that's coming off our still. She's been invaluable to us.
I have a question for Tyrone Cote, and you don't have to answer this one if you don't want to, but who is the most direct competition for Wyoming whiskey? I mean, there's been a couple of small distilleries pop up in Wyoming since you guys, but there really is no in-state competition, right?
No. And a lot of the distilleries are making clear spirits, and they're doing a good job of that. A couple of them are flirting in the whiskey category, and I 100% support them. I hope they come out with great whiskey. Bourbon, whatever they're making, and I hope they kill it, because the state needs that. We need more in this space, a little more diversity in the type of businesses that succeed here. So, but none of them are scaled to the size that we are, and we got to jump start on them. We are well ahead as far as growth, in the cycle of the company. But to Tyrone's question, you tell me, what do you think our biggest competitor is? I mean, there's certain brands that I could think of that are similar. But I kind of draw a line between companies that are sourcing whiskey and companies that are making whiskey. And so of the companies that are making their own whiskey in a smaller setting like us, I would say that's a main competitor of us, but it's so regional now that I don't see us competing directly with Texas bourbons. Maybe to connoisseurs might pick up both, but I think the folks who really get into bourbon are going to be picking up all of it, and whatever they like is what they're going to end up with, drinking more often than not. I think there's so many good bourbons out there, some that I don't like personally because of my own personal flavor profile and what I like to taste, but that doesn't mean they're no good. Someone else is going to like them because it does suit them. So I kind of like anybody who's willing to give it a go and puts out a good product. But I do draw a line between someone who's making bourbon and someone who's buying it.
Tyrone suggests Westland is a potential competitor, and I wouldn't go that far because Westland is focusing on American single malts and not bourbons. So I would say probably the most direct competition would be some of the many distilleries in Colorado that are making some really nice bourbons, or at least in terms of direct competitors for you guys.
Yep. And again, though, I don't see us competing as strongly again in Wyoming. There's not much competition. You could bring those in, and people, when they come to Wyoming, are here to get Wyoming products. And so I don't see much of that as competition. But I think when we step over our state line, that's when the competition starts from our perspective. And luckily, again, and thankfully, due to Edrington, we're getting a lot of placements where some of these standalone distilleries just simply can't. And I don't say that as a criticism at all. It's just the fact of life, because I was in their shoes, or we were in their shoes not long ago, fighting for every shelf placement we could get. And we're just lucky to have kind of entered the COVID era at the right time, when people were pulling bottles and drinking bottles of whiskey versus cocktails from a bar. And we've really benefited from it, which I hate to say anything positive about a pandemic, but it definitely helped us.
I know that about a month or so ago, I was in New York City at an event at the Campbell Apartment at Grand Central Station, and got there a little early. And I was sitting at the bar having a beer, and I saw a bottle of Wyoming whiskey on the back bar, and thought, wow, okay, if you've made it into Grand Central Station, you've done something.
You know, the account that we got into in New York that I had pushed really hard on our team there to get into is Raoul's on Prince Street. That's my favorite restaurant in New York City. My good friend Pete had used to bring me there, and ever since I keep going back for the bar steak at the bar, and I would work on the bartender and their manager to bring Wyoming whiskey in, and I couldn't do it. I failed. But Edrington was able to get it in. Tommy Moriello, this is for you. Thank you. And I was able to go back to New York not long ago and sit down and drink Wyoming whiskey at that place. And that was incredibly fulfilling for me.
Dave Kuhn joined us a bit late and asks if the flooding around Yellowstone has had any adverse impact on the distillery. The distillery is well away from Yellowstone in terms of distance, but and it's in a fairly dry area, so I would say no, but please correct me if I'm wrong on that.
You're correct. The actual distillery itself has not been negatively affected. The storm was very narrow, actually, and it passed through Jackson. We got some intense storms, but they were short-lived. And then the northern part of Yellowstone was really the focus of that, stretching over to Red Lodge, Montana. And we were spared any major damage. I mean, around here, we've been getting a lot of rain this spring, snow and then rain as things have warmed up, which we're thankful for. But Wyoming dodged a bullet on that one for sure.
And your farmers dodged a bullet too, right?
Correct. Yep. Brent, we talked, and no damage. We did just fine. Cody didn't take much of a hit either. It was north of there, not by much, but it was north of there.
Question for you from Tyrone. Do you think you're going to see more of your product going into bars versus retail in the post-pandemic environment?
I think that's a natural progression of the product. Yes. I mean, I think you're going to see a lot of stuff going back on premise that hasn't been focused on because of COVID. I've always viewed Wyoming whiskey as being more of an off-premise brand, and I can't explain exactly why. Maybe it's because of the tourism nature of Wyoming, and people come out here and they're looking to bring something cool back home to their buddies. And so I think it's been more of a bottle pull versus a cocktail pull. But we've got great placements around Jackson in particular, and a few other places around the state where we're in these cocktails. And anybody who was at Taste Jackson Hole last night at the top of the gondola experienced some of the best cocktails you'll ever have as a result of Kim Barger, who I work with here, and is just an absolute scientist when it comes to cocktails. So I'm hoping that that'll spread more. And I know that Edrington's efforts will focus more on premise as time rolls on. But again, I have always looked at it more as an off-premise brand than on-premise.
Let's talk about that festival. It's going on this all weekend, right?
Yes. Long time ago, it used to be the Jackson Hole Wine Fest, and then or wine auction, sorry. And then that died, and a couple friends of mine restarted it as Jackson Hole Food and Wine. And then there are a handful of events over the course of the year. There's kind of a winter focus, midwinter, and then summer focus. And the summer focus is right now. So last night, Taste of Jackson Hole basically highlights the best restaurants, bars, breweries, distillers, and brings you up the gondola. And it's all out. Small plates, cocktails, glasses of wine, local producers, Jackson Hole Winery, you name it, Jackson Hole Stillworks, that are putting stuff out. And it's really the best spot to go to get a taste of what Jackson Hole can offer. We did have an interesting end of the evening because you have to get up by gondola and leave by gondola. A lightning storm parked right on top of the gondola, and people couldn't leave. We were on a hold for 45 minutes or so. Folks got on the gondola, started to descend. They had to stop it again because of lightning. And so you had folks hanging in these boxes off the gondola for, I don't know, another 20, 25 minutes while this lightning storm passed through. So it was a little spicy at the end of the evening, but it was a great night. And then tomorrow there's an event called Savor, which is held on my partner's ranch, the Mead Ranch, high dollar ticket. And they bring in chefs from around the country, vintners from around the country, from California primarily, and really high end stuff. And we've been invited to be there as well. So we'll be supporting a couple cocktails as well.
And by this time next year, you should have your own tasting room in Jackson, right?
I'm hoping by August, we're going to have our own tasting room here in Jackson. You and I've discussed previously, we got a law changed, which moved a number by one from 1 to 2. So as a result of our manufacturing permit that we have to make whiskey in Wyoming, we now have the right to open up 2 tasting rooms. One has to be attendant to the distillery itself, and the other one can be located elsewhere. So we found a temporary location just off the square here in Jackson, and just had a meeting this morning. We're busting up barrels, and we're going to use barrel staves as part of the presentation on the back wall. And so we were just going through some design details on that. We're going to get some new flooring laid down, and I think anybody who comes should stop by. I think you'll be impressed.
Donner Pass Whiskey wants to know if the tourist bars in Jackson Hole are pouring your bottles.
Absolutely. It's after our rough start, as you know, we bounced back hugely, and we are on almost every cocktail menu in town. They've got our specialty whiskeys on the back bar, the Cowboy Bar on the town square, which is the #1 attraction for locals and tourists alike, have been buying private barrels from us now for years. They're going through maybe 3 or 4 barrels a year. We did a semi-custom label for them. So yeah, you'll find Wyoming whiskey on every bar in town and every liquor store.
What do you think the future holds? Give me a sense of what the next 10 years is going to be like. Let's assume that Edrington takes a majority position with us. I think you'll see a continuation of our small batch at a price point, very close to where it's at now. I think that's the foundation of our brand. And I defend that in every meeting, where it comes up. But there will be a premiumization, that has been happening and will happen in our less, those SKUs that we don't have as much volume, things that we've been working on with Nancy. I think you'll see a focus on those and how they're deployed will be interesting. There are certain focus markets that we have right now through Edrington. Be interesting to see if it remains in those markets or if it changes in any way. But our volumes are going to go up in a few years as a result of our fermentation expansion a couple years back. So that'll give us a little wider reach. So you're going to see that for sure. I could guarantee that. But as far as the brand, I hope it doesn't change much. I try to defend the brand and what it is whenever possible against too much change. And, I'm sure you've seen it. There have been some smaller brands, not just in our industry, but others that once purchased by a larger company tend to lose a little bit of what got them great. And I hope, and I do believe that Edrington doesn't have any real plan to change us massively. And that's one of the reasons why we're in partnership with them, because I think they see what's special about us. Once you visit Wyoming, you get it a little bit more. And a number of them have been here, and I think that's really helped. So to answer the question, I hope not much. I hope that what you see is maybe slightly more premium labels. I think there's going to be slight changes on that. But at the end of the day, I think our bourbon is going to be very similar to where we're at. We're going to let our barrels tell us what we should do with them and not try to design something that might not fit our DNA. So I hope not much. I hope you just see subtle refinements as we move forward. And in 10 years' time, you'll probably be able to pick up a dram, in Japan. You'll be able to pick up a dram in the UK. You'll be able to pick up a dram, in numerous locations around the world. And that would be fantastic. That would be really fulfilling. Dave Kuhn wants to know if there's any thought of experimenting with other types of casks beyond PX ones.
We have already. And I can't really say too much more about that, but you know who our partners are. And so you could kind of draw your own conclusions. Some of it has been very positive. And so it'll be interesting to see if that program grows. We've got some whiskey now that we will be bottling and then trying to figure out how we're going to label it and how we're going to market it. Not big quantities. These would be very small releases, but really spectacular whiskeys. So yes, the answer is yes. We have been doing that, and we will continue to do our PX for the foreseeable future. We really like where that's gone. Nancy's been a big fan of that, and we defer to her judgment on that as well. So I don't want to get too crazy, and I don't think Edrington wants to get too crazy with Chardonnay finishes and whatnot, because at the end of the day, we want our whiskey to shine through, and we're only going to use things that are going to complement what we're doing, not mask in any way.
The Edrington deal also gives you a ready-made market for your X barrels, your empty barrels, right?
It does. And some barrels have been shipped, and we'll see, if they get, how they're deployed. But more than anything, we're finding brewers pick up our barrels. Almost all of them. We see a lot of whiskey finished beers being, popping up, and we're sharing our name with them just so people can understand, where it's coming from. But that's really been our biggest buyer of used barrels. Some furniture, of course. At least 15 of these barrels are going to end up on a wall here in Jackson. But yeah, I would say breweries are number one. And I can't speak for Edrington as far as whether or not they're going to start taking more and more of them or not. It was definitely discussion points during our negotiations. But up until now, there hasn't been a huge desire for all of our barrels to be shipped overseas.
But at some point, they could exercise that right of first refusal or something like that.
Yeah,
really.
and that would be great. I would love it if they did. That also, these are all good things.
Highland Park Highland Parker Macallan Wyoming Whiskey Edition.
Well, if they want to improve their image, I would strongly suggest they do that.
How has it been for you trying to balance running a law practice in Jackson with running the distillery operations and running the company on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I'm no longer running it. As a result of Edrington's involvement, we've been able to shift a number of those tasks. National marketing and sales, they're handling that. I sit on a team that helps with marketing. We have a GM in Kirby that's doing a fantastic job of running the day-to-day over there. And that took a ton off my plate. Early on, Steve Nally was over there. He was doing great. Then Sam Mead. I was more hands-on at that point because I had to be. We didn't have a team, that extended beyond a very close-knit group. And so I really didn't practice law for a long time. Very little. I managed my firm here, but beyond that, it was focused. It was Wyoming Whiskey was dominating my life, and I wanted it to. You don't get a chance to do something like this many times in your life or your career. So almost 100% of my time, I'd probably say 90% of my time was dedicated to Wyoming Whiskey and growing it and making mistakes and learning from them and, re-implementing new plans and whatnot. So that was great. Ever since Edrington's involvement, it's at least allowed me a little bit of time to practice some law. And it's kind of nice to step back into that world, not with both feet by any means, but, kind of toe in the water, service a few really good clients. And it's just good. It's healthy. I'm excited about it again. So, but at the end of the day, my passion is Wyoming Whiskey. It's something that I played a good role in creating along with Brad. And I'm not going to let go of it. It's way too cool. It's way too fun.
You mentioned construction at the distillery during the pandemic. What's being done to expand production out there to guarantee the supply for the future?
We increased our fermentation by 150%. We didn't need to add any stills. Our current still, we still have a little bit more production out of it if we wanted to run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But the adding of 150% of the increasing of 100% fermentation has been the biggest step up. And if you remember, having been into the distillery, there was that open area next to the first four, and that's where the fermentation went in. Larger tanks, and that's what has blown us up more than anything. If we get any bigger, we'll have to push the walls out, and then at that point, likely add a still. But that's been the number one thing, and the addition of rickhouses. We're up to 7 now.
7 rickhouses. That's great.
Yep. It's another thing that you don't think about in the beginning. You think, oh, we'll get a rickhouse or 2 and we'll be fine. But we've got a lot of whiskey laid down at this point, and it's going out almost as fast as it's going in. But because production jumped, we've needed to expand our storage so that we can accommodate all of that.
And for the folks who are not familiar with it, the climate in Kirby is especially unique for maturing whiskey, right?
It's very arid. And the temperature swings both daily and annually are pronounced. On a daily basis, you could get up to a 50-degree temperature swing outside of the warehouse, that is. And then that translates into less and less as you get into the actual barrels. But I think that really accelerates our maturation because you're getting so much of that breathing, in and out, that respiration really. And then once it hits 40 degrees inside the barrel, it pretty much hibernates. And so for almost 6 months, maybe more, you're in that hibernation phase where we're not getting any maturation happening. There's something happening, but I don't know exactly what that would be. So yeah, it is very unique. Internal temperature, lowest temperature, I think was 5. And that means outside's got to be minus 20, for a long period of time for the, that thermal mass to really get that cold. And then the hottest temperatures we'll get at the top of our warehouse in, August 1, let's say, it's going to be around 140 degrees outside of the barrel. I can't remember what the internal temperature was. I heard that the other day, but, massive temperature swings. And that's why we're Wyoming whiskey. That's why our whiskey tastes the way it does. I've always wanted to send a few barrels to Texas and a few barrels to Brooklyn and have them send us barrels and then compare them, to see what the maturation process does in each of those environments. But we've never really gotten anybody to bite on that.
And the altitude plays a factor too.
I'm sure it does. I don't know exactly what impact that has. I think the temperature and the arid nature of the environment is probably the most profound. And the fact that our warehouses are sitting, out in sage fields with rangeland grasses and whatnot versus bluegrass in Kentucky or whatever you have in Texas and whatnot. So all of that, I think, has probably the greatest effect. Barrels are the same, of course, as most people are getting, but I would say that has the greatest impact on the flavor profiles of our whiskeys.
Well, we've wasted 45 minutes of your time tonight, David, that you're never going to get back, and I definitely appreciate it.
That.
I appreciate the time as always. David DeFazio from Wyoming Whiskey. You can find them on the web at wyomingwhiskey.com, and this weekend at the Jackson Hole Food and Wine Festival, and coming soon to a retail shelf near you. Look for batch number 100 and the bottles with the Wyoming etched on the outside of the bottle that really sort of set those bottles apart from what you're usually going to see on a retail shelf.
And I'll leave you with this, so you'll invite me back. Our 10th anniversary product, which will be coming out right around December 1st. We'll need to talk about that next time we visit.
Definitely. And hopefully I'll see you in December in Jackson at the Cowboy Bar, and we can share a dram of that 10th anniversary whiskey.
I hope you'll join us.
Okay. Thank you again, David DeFazio from Wyoming Whiskey, and thank you for joining us tonight. We'll see you next week. Hit the like button, and if you joined us late, we'll have a live rebroadcast of this podcast version coming out middle of next week, and you can catch an on-demand replay on the WhiskyCast YouTube channel. We'll see you next week. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.